America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock American, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Hey, and welcome everybody to a special edition of our Daily Gun Show podcast. I did run the audio a little bit low. Thanks for the feedback out there. We are interviewing or having some time to talk with Willis Lee, one of the NRA board members, someone who I've seen at just about every Second Amendment advocacy industry meet for over the last years. And I finally was introduced by Cheryl Todd at the NRA at the SHOT Show this year, a few months back, and you've been busy with getting ready for NRA, but we finally were able to meet up to have our chat tonight, and I'm going to introduce Willis and let you take maybe 20 minutes to tell us who you are, what you do, then we'll talk for 20 minutes about why you do that, why you do what you do, and then we'll wrap up the show with maybe 20 minutes of how you do what you do. I'd like to let people know who you are as a board member, as a Second Amendment advocate, and why you're doing what you're doing, and then we can talk about how we're doing this on the large platform, our largest soapbox out there. We're simulcasting it on gunchannels.com. We appreciate everybody that shows up and joins our conversations, participates in our two-way media. So both Willis and I are watching the chats. I'll shut up and introduce Willis Lee. Thanks for joining us today.
That's great to be here, Pete. Look, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate this. And if folks don't know how hard you've worked just trying to make this thing happen, it's probably been 6 weeks since we tried to set this up, fitting our schedules, making the right time to have this this opportunity. So thanks for letting me get on here.
You bet. And right back at you, because this isn't easy as a board member, as just a person with Easter and with the show coming up and with the limited time between NRA and now. It was great that you're able to jump in and give us some insight as to what you do and why. And again, I'll let you talk a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, and we'll do more of what we do. I have military background. I'll cover in a little bit, so it's sometimes a little difficult to just talk about me and me. Though I got used to it in this recent NRA election. So bottom line is, we'll hit some of that and then talk a lot about what we do, because since I saw you even, we had the Great American Outdoor Show, we've had CPAC, of which I'll explain more in depth on that. And then, as you said, getting ready for the annual meeting. Willis Lee, NRA Board of Directors. I am, by training and life experiences, a military guy. Military brat, grew up as a youth in Europe in my father's career, and then moved back to Virginia, went to school there at West Point, 22 years as an Airborne Ranger Armor Officer, which included Cold War, a little bit of counterterrorism operations, and Desert Storm. Then jumped out of the military looking for something, somewhere I could still make an impact in what we do in America, protecting, defending our freedom. That drove me into politics. And we'll talk about this a little later in terms of how a lot of us, including all of our listeners, get more involved in what we do to protect the freedoms that we have. In my case, I walked into the local, in my case, GOP headquarters, and I said, I want to help. And from there, I went on to eventually become a state party chair and member of the RNC, linked up with a lot of the NRA representatives who work on the political scene. Second Amendment's my hot button issue. It was a good fit. So I started moving toward working with the NRA. Eventually appointed to a single committee at the NRA, then a couple, and then I ran for the board. Lost my first time out, not uncommon at all, but still stings. Lost my first time out, won election the next time, and this last month was reelected to a 3-year term. Let me roll into some of where I am right now, because I can get into background in a second. So what'll be of interest to the listeners now, I'm a co-manager of a program and I serve on 6 committees, chairing the NRA Outreach Committee and co-chairing the NRA Collegiate Programs Committee. But the other committees are all virtually on the political activist side. I'm a member of the Federal Affairs Subcommittee of the Legislative Affairs Committee, Grassroots Development Committee. So those all angle toward toward more the political side. The one that I spend a lot of time in because of my background is chaired by who is now NRA president, wasn't before when he took over the committee, but Lieutenant Colonel Ollie North chairs the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. And that one, obviously, my background, very dear to me. Some of the distinction that I'll make in what we do is each year it's potential for committees to change. And we're coming up to that point again. After we all leave the annual meeting, we will, in some cases, be reappointed, but in some cases we do a shuffle of committees. So we're never sure from year to year where we'll be. So I'm looking forward to that. Let me, Pete, as long as you're letting me go along here, let me give a little bit about this, where I'd been before. I've mentioned that I grew up in Europe during an Army career there with my father. That's where I first was exposed to a lot of what we consider in our realm of the Second Amendment. The NRA, for the most part, 3/4 of it, has nothing to do with the legislative efforts that you and I know about or hear about, mostly read about in the newspapers, and track on Capitol Hill or our state capitals or city councils. The NRA was originated as a training organization, morphed or included then conservation, hunting, sportsmanship, and only then eventually became in effect, a legislative issues organization. And part of that came out of the realization that that everyone should have access to be able to defend themselves. And at the time, this is post-Civil War, we were one of the original champions of African Americans being able to be armed using Second Amendment rights. So we consider ourselves the oldest civil rights organization in the US. So all of that work that I'm doing now, mostly on the legislative side, but a lot of in the NRA program side, with especially this spate this summer, as summer comes, with our spate of competitions at all levels in the shooting sports, is what we'll be working on. In the near time, though, we are, as you mentioned, embarking this next week on our NRA annual meeting. An annual meeting is the huge event. If anybody still has the ability to get there, we're going to Indianapolis. There'll be over 80,000 of us, Second Amendment lovers, hunters, shooters, collectors, who will gather there for 3 days of annual meeting at the end of this next week. And it is just a mind-boggling, phenomenal time. I guess the thing that the numbers that most affect me, 15 acres of guns, gears, and equipment. That 15 acres in the convention center that cover vendors and exhibitors from all aspects of what we do. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if any of that's generated any question for you. Anything you want to know in detail?
I think I just wanted to add one thing. When you talked about the NRA starting out as after the Civil War as a marksmanship, and then the first civil rights organization, I can't agree more. I mean, I want to emphasize that. But I think even its conservation efforts were a result of one of the waves of anti-gun or anti-Second Amendment stuff was addressed towards hunters. And I think the NRA started, even though, and I'm trying to put my, the history of the NRA together in my own mind. You probably know more about it than I do, but it seems like the conservation drive from the NRA was a response to a push against hunting and basically one of the first anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment pushes. We've had waves of these over the years, so we've had multiple ones. But anyway, I appreciate all your drive. Now, I haven't had a chance to read the questions that are coming in from the text chats out there, but as a board member, this isn't a paid position by the NRA. You're doing this as a volunteer, correct?
Absolutely, and none of the board members are paid as board members. And if I don't, especially with your listeners, make clear that I get this opportunity to speak with you today because I'm not an NRA spokesman. So that's something all of you. You're not getting the NRA message. That's the downside of this. The upside of this is I am on the board of directors, and I get to come and speak my opinion and give you my thoughts on this. And in fact, one of those, and we're asked this often because I joke in our activist life, being a volunteer is very, very expensive. So when you see NRA directors at different events, I just mentioned that I was at CPAC, at Great American, I was at SHOT. We're doing that on our own because we want to be out there. We want to be out with the folks who are supporting the industry. We want to show our love to all those people who are in this fight with us. But it's not by being paid by the NRA. So that's correct. It's not a paid position.
All right, so we've got some questions coming in about NRA and stuff, and our plan is to have this chat to talk about Willis and what he's doing and why he does it and how he does it. And then we'll take the NRA questions and meet up again after NRA at some point and address some NRA specific questions. So why don't we get into, you mentioned your initial introduction to NRA was being appointed to committees.
Yeah, the NRA, in fact, there's some discussion about the size of the board of the NRA. There's a total of 76 members. And it makes for a large board of directors for any type of organization and for a nonprofit. But most of our work is conducted in 38 standing committees and 6 called committees. And the 38 committees span everything from action shooting to where I am at outreach to collegiate programs. So there's so much territory that we cover. Board members are spread across those committees. And we additionally have other members of our community who may be experts on that specific area, may have knowledge or experience in a particular a strength, legislative affairs, that they are invited to participate on the committees. But the committee work is where most of the initiatives begin and then are pushed through the entire board once we learn about them.
So then with that insight, what I guess was I didn't even know about that aspect of it. So I guess what was your introduction to that course to be involved with the NRA? And then what spurred you to then go forward with it? Because a whole bunch of people are going to find out about it today, and only a few of them are going to pursue it. What was it that got you to pursue that whole path?
Well, I mentioned that I've been a member of the RNC as a state party chairman. So I linked up with a lot of the RNC, the legislative types that worked in that arena. And they, in fact, approached me and asked me if I were interested. And for me, it was changing what I was doing, which was in general conservative politics across the board, to focusing more on this single issue of the Second Amendment. That obviously interests me because it's my hot button issue. So I jumped right into that and had the opportunity. The first committee I was on was then called Urban Affairs. Now it's Outreach, and I'm honored to now actually move to become the chair of that. But it went from there generally into areas of our focus. So my second committee that I was assigned to or asked to be assigned to was the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. So there's a link between what our expertise may be and where we end up assigned. The next ones, as I made my rounds and met more people, were the Legislative Affairs Committees, and what I do as an activist in grassroots. So I'll throw that in. There's a cross in for those folks, certainly at the national level, but in a lot of cases at our state level. And for our listeners who are involved in this, they know this. There's a cross among our effort in a lot of things we do. In addition to being on the NRA board, I'm also the president of the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. This is a very conservative wing of the Republican Party. So we're Republicans, but we're the conservatives in the Republicans. I've also been asked, and have been for several years now, I think going on about 7, maybe 8 years on the board of the American Conservative Union Foundation. Now, that name might not ring a bell to you, but the American Conservative Union Foundation are the folks who each year rate each member of Congress. More recognizable to a lot of our people is we're the hosts of CPAC each year. So there's a lot of other places that we get that we're involved in, and all of them complementary to what I have the opportunity to do at the NRA.
One of the questions that came in from Benny on the YouTube side is, can you go into detail how you started helping locally?
Absolutely. And I love this story. You know, I was at a conference, the Second Amendment Institute hosted a conference for young activists recently, and I told them this. For one, I got a late start. I'd had a military career, you know, and so now I'm I'm older than most of the starting activists. But I wanted a way, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to make a difference in people's lives. That's what you're doing in the military, defending freedom. So of the options I came up with was I wanted to get into politics. So literally, I walked into the local headquarters and said, I want to help. And the anecdote that I use is here, I'm a colonel coming out of the Army. I'd been in command. I'm a combat veteran. In my first week, I spent there stuffing envelopes for fundraising letters. And the next week, I graduated. You have to earn responsibility in this business, and I showed I was so good at that I spent a week of making phone calls off of scripted phone calls to folks to get out to vote. You know, so as the story goes, I went home and I talked to my wife. She'd been in politics, involved in it during our military career. But I looked at her and I said, what is this? I'm stuffing letters. I'm making friggin' scripted phone calls. I want to be involved in politics. And she looked at me and smiled and she said, this is politics. It is as simple for all of our listeners, for our friend who just wrote that question, as simple as going in and saying, I want to help. There's so much to do. Knocking on doors, making phone calls, organizing canvassing drives. So much you can do locally to help the effort. And if nothing else here, if you're on this web chat, then you're already an activist, organizing people to get them involved. You know, as much time as we spend complaining about Second Amendment rights, complaining about Congress, complaining about Obamacare or not Obamacare, complaining about taxes, the one thing that it all comes down to for us is winning elections. And that's winning elections at every level. I'm talking about, sorry for the background noise right now. I'm talking about winning elections, running people, and winning elections for your local school board, for your local town or city council. Not just supporting folks, finding folks to run for Congress and Senate. That's all the juicy stuff. For president, we need to start finding and supporting Second Amendment folks running for every level at every office. So I'm hoping that answers some of the question. Long answer, but there's a little anecdote I wanted to throw in about helping.
I think that's a good answer. I'm looking at the gun channel side, and we got the question answered about what committees, I think. David asked, what's your favorite thing about firearms? General question.
Yeah, well, thanks, David. I come at this from the political aspects. I've been around firearms all my life, growing up as a youth hunting with my father in Europe, through an entire military career. So you can imagine I've shot everything. I am an armor officer, so I use the hashtag like big guns, because I think if you want to carry gun, the 120 millimeter smooth bore on an M1A1 is a great gun to kind of have in your pocket. But the aspect from where I come now is a political aspect. So it's not even the firearms itself, it's the right. It's our right, and I'll go back. You guys, you're on this. So this is something you've already heard. The Second Amendment doesn't give us the right to keep and bear arms. The The Second Amendment simply affirms our God-given right to defend ourselves. So that's the aspect I come at it from firearms, and it's not a specific firearm itself. Although I got to admit, for having a closet full of metal and wood, now it's getting more full of ARs and different builds and different experiments, different pistols.
So it's still a growing collection. You're still acquiring.
In our world, I think it's always growing. Probably the problem that most of us have that are listening is the being able to stop and not grow for however long.
Oh, this one's from another question from Clover Tack on the gun channel side. It's an interesting one. With strong ties to the RNC, do you view the Second Amendment through that prism or as an apolitical issue?
I have strong ties to the RNC. It just happens that a lot of my friends are there, and I have Democratic friends also. In offhand, I'll say no. This is a single issue, so it's not tied politically. Although I will tell you that in the last 20 years of being involved in this, I, like you, have watched both sides pretty much go to their corners. In the Democratic Party, certainly at the national level, and almost all at the state level, and very much, not totally though, at the local level, the Democrats have pretty much destroyed, pushed away anybody who's pro-Second Amendment. That's just what they do. Now, I'll tell you, on the Republican side, Republicans have generally done, that's at those same levels, just what I'm discussing, done the same thing to anyone, as an example, who is pro-choice or that's, there's several different terms, but pro-choice on the abortion issue. So both sides are pretty much going to the corners. No, it's not a Republican issue. I have a lot of libertarian friends who are very much involved in this. But across the board, what I found, especially as I've gotten more involved with our outreach, the single issue spans everyone. And I don't do an identity politics, but the fact is we all have an identity. So our LGBTQ community has been much more involved with the NRA recently. They've always been involved with self-protection and firearms, but a lot of that community is realizing that the NRA is the place to come if they want to be able to safeguard their right to defend themselves. So it's across the board. You know, I've got a good friend, Gina Roberts, who's going to join us at this outreach dinner, who works in that community a lot. And I'm going to go through some of the things, some of the boards, and you guys might recognize some of these names. I've worked with Maj Touré for the last 2 years. He's the founder of Black Guns Matter out of Philadelphia, working in urban areas. I'll have dinner this next week with Kevin Dixie out of St. Louis, who is a firearms and safety trainer. So across the board within our outreach efforts, we're looking at this being, and it is, I guess we're not just looking at it, it is much more than a Republican effort. So thanks for that question. I guess I think I might have got a little long-winded on that.
That's an open question. That was a tough one to even comprehend, let alone come up with an answer off the top of your head. Here's a little more basic one, but going back to your experience again, David from the Gun Channel side asks, is there a rise in young people getting more involved, young people getting more interested in firearms and firearms rights?
Thanks, David. Thanks for that question. I'd say, first of all, define young people. And I won't ask you to come back, David, but I'll define young people. And I'll give some examples. 6,000 high school students just participated in the, I believe it was a trap shooting contest, and the organization itself's got about 28,000 members across the nation. You know, we have collegiate shooting programs that are growing in strength, but there are issues that we're having on college campuses with the effectively liberal administrators not wanting folks to participate or have shooting clubs. You know, so that's just an example. one more I'll give you is our Eddie Eagle program. So now I've gone even younger. The NRA Eddie Eagle program, which is one of several organizations' youth training programs, but Eddie Eagle now has been around for, we're just starting the 31st year. Last year, we finished training the 30th, I don't know how to even say this right, the 30 millionth young child with Eddie Eagle. So, and we've already passed 31 million. So there's a lot of exposure. I don't think we as a community, Second Amendment community, are where we want to be. Millennials have shown that, at least the vocal ones, that they would more not be with us. But that's an in general statement. That's not across the board. And then some of the youth I'm seeing, a lot of my friends, some of these young shooters are phenomenal. I mean, they're great shooters. They're people that we're going to see eventually competing for us at the Olympics. But we are working more on, I guess, exposing the youth. The NRA has a hunters mentorship program where we encourage hunters to take somebody, their family, their neighborhood, their schools, out with them hunting, expose them to the different things that we do in our community. So thanks for that question. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, for sure. And you've got, like I said, more insight than a lot of us as far as knowing what, what programs are out there. We see them perhaps if we go to the range or something, but seeing them from the menu on the NRA is a different perspective on it. I've been asking, so I try to do my interviews in a 3-part format with what it is you're doing, why you do it, and then how. So I've been asking the people that are following with us and being part of the conversation to start asking some questions about how you do it. So now play host and kind of switch topics here for a bit and give you as much time as you'd like. You've already addressed to some extent in your explanation on what you're doing, why you do it. But again, you're putting a lot of time and effort into this. One of the questions that's I'll ask here in a moment is going to get into the amount of time you spend on it. But to put this much time into something that doesn't get an immediate benefit, there's always that question of why. And I hope that this is going to inspire or give people some insight as to why the people that are out there doing it are doing it. So I know it's an open-ended question, but why do you do what you do?
Pete, I'll explain this, and I don't yet. We're just getting to know each other, and I have a general idea of our audience and where they are on this, and I'll go through this because it's come up very much so in the last several years. It's come to the forefront. Look, I believe, and you guys strap in, because I believe this truly is a fight for the soul of America. I feel the weight, the pressure of defending freedom, which for us at where I am right now with the NRA is the largest, strongest, really only effective organization that we have in our Second Amendment community. And listen, that we have to influence elections, which is how you influence the laws, notwithstanding the courts. So with that organization, I believe that we are uniquely situated right now to be the ones in our community, to be the people, to be able to defend freedom. And that weight that I feel, every one of us and everyone listening should feel that weight, because this is no longer a matter of well, if we lose, what the heck, we'll try again in a couple of years, we'll do something different, it will be okay. It won't. This is you either win or you lose on this one. So in that sense, for me, that's why I'm here. I believe there's a specific reason. I don't know what it is, but I believe there is a reason that I'm here right now where I am. And yes, I believe every one of us should feel that weight. And I think you do. I believe every time you pop open whatever, your Facebook page, the newspaper, turn on the news, and you are angered by the direction and some of the comments in the direction that our nation may be going, that you too probably feel the weight I feel of having to make sure we win this fight for the soul of America. So I don't mean to drag it into too serious a discussion, but that is the why that I do this, because pretty much I've been chosen to do this.
Awesome. Yep. Well, that's exactly the kind of answer we're looking for with a question like that one. So this one's, I think, a good transition into the how. So again, the third leg or third platform of my projects here are to facilitate others to do what you're doing, whatever we're doing. And so I've asked some questions to the audience of how about any questions they have about how you do it. So, we have a lot of technology available to us. We have a lot of options, sometimes too many options available to us. We certainly all have the ability to be in the conversation. It seems like you're doing it well. Is this something, the technology side of it, is it something that's comfortable? Is it something that's a struggle? Is it something that you look forward to, or is it just something you fight through? How do you look at the hows of, once you've decided, we know why you're doing it and the kind of things that you're doing, how do you do it? Like, is that end of it a struggle, or is that end of it the easy part? Or
the first thing I get that, thanks, Pete, and I appreciate that, because that is obviously an impact on every one of us. And the first thing I'll note that is, I'm blessed right now. I'm a retired Army guy. I have the time to do this. But most of us, we are, wow, if we're in school or we're in a full-time job, we're raising a family, we have 2-3 young children, you just don't have the time that you would necessarily want to put into this type of activity. So what it comes down to for me, and I tell people, as an example, the 2020 elections are coming up. You find a candidate, he supports the Second Amendment, she supports the Second Amendment, you want to support them, but all of those constraints keep you from doing a lot on a campaign. If all you can give is 2 hours a week to make phone calls or to go knock on doors, the campaigns are going to love having you. You are going to help somebody who supports our life, Second Amendment life, get elected. And that's important. If you are more technically adept, then the social media is so incredibly powerful now for reaching out. We know how it can also be used in a very detrimental manner. Fake news, being censored by any of these social media platforms, but it can also be a very powerful tool for us. And so now you're talking to an older guy who's kind of kicking and screaming coming into the social media world. And at one point, I think it was about 3 years ago, where I went to my daughters and I was so tremendously proud. And I went, okay, guys, I'm on Facebook. How about that? And they looked at me and they kind of smiled and went, well, that's great, Dad, but everybody's left Facebook. We've all gone to wherever it was. I think it was Instagram at the time, and then Snapchat or something like that. So it's progressively moving. Regardless, though, and here's what I'll say, regardless if you're older and being forced to make sure you keep up with this so that we stay in touch with people, or you're younger and you're just totally adept at this, this is the message we need to get out. So even if you're not actively on a campaign, if you're not actively in what we would call the Second Amendment movement, organizing, going to NRA meetings, things like that, going to your local state committee, there is so much information that we can continue to pass to our supporters so that they know what the situation is in your community, in your state, federally, that it's important that we all participate, and that's a way that every one of us can participate. It doesn't have to just be somebody who, like me, is retired and has the time and wherewithal to do this. So Pete, I'd say, yeah, the technology and being able to stay with the advancements, absolutely important. And I by the way, folks, I had mentioned Pete just before we came on this. I've watched some of his podcasts, and the tools, that the magnitude of the tools and sources that he has, that he can tap into, that he can bring to us. If we match that to our community, we'd be able to keep virtually our entire community, 120 million firearms owners in the U.S., informed of all the current issues. So that's what I think we need to do and where we need to go.
Right on. Now you mentioned 120 million firearms owners. That I've heard lots of numbers. Is that a solid number?
I use it because that's the best number that I've had from, I don't know if it was a CDC study. I don't know where that study came from. But yeah, I use that, and that's firearms owners, and obviously not even close to the number of firearms themselves.
Sure, that's everybody with a grandpa's firearm in their closet to people like ourselves that have acquired collections over the years.
Yeah. So that's what that would be, and I dare say, especially in the environment these days, I would think that that's a low number, because I would think that in general, to be asked that question, there are people, I dare say a lot of people, who would be hesitant to admit publicly that they do own or have possession of a firearm. And these days, we've seen all the jokes. It's like as the laws change and all our friends start saying, "Oh, darn, I just lost all mine. They fell off the boat." Because we don't know what the government's going to do, when they're going to decide that they want to outlaw bump stocks, or when they want to decide that, like Swalwell, we're going to take away all your ARs or your semis. So I think that number, tell you the truth, is actually probably low. What we need to do is get that 120 million firearms owners voting to protect their right to own and possess those firearms. And I don't think we're there yet.
Oh yeah, but it's interesting. Thanks for the insight on that number. Question from David on the gun channel side again is kind of a transition question. How many people do you have on your team? How many days of work, or how many days do you focus on this work? How many hours a day? I guess I'm not reading that well. How many hours a day do you focus on the work?
Yeah, so David, I'm not sure of the team per se. And Pete, maybe you can expound on that.
Well, I guess he just assumes that this is more than one person can do, or maybe he means on the committees. But
sure. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, let me throw into that. Our committee, the outreach committee at the NRA, is 17, and we're all in our own niches. They've got like I said, Identity Pollux, a very intelligent young Black woman in Memphis who does great work for us, all the way to Ashley Lunville, who is in a wheelchair for her adult life and is the best huntress of which I know, African safaris and otherwise. So that's across the board, but that's the NRA Outreach Committee. I do my work, and those boards that I'm on, the NFRA, National Federation of Republican Assemblies, our organization, we have an executive committee, a board, and then all of our state organizations. And I'll tell you, if you don't have a good team, it wouldn't work. And I have a very good team that I am honored to be able to work with there. The same with the NRA. I'm just one person within the NRA. I do have the opportunity and the time, and my family is extremely supportive, to allow me to go to different events where I can not only be an example of an NRA board member at, for instance, SHOT Show, but it gives folks an opportunity. There's a lot of questions about the NRA and the board, and a lot of times there's some folks who, either way, you either want to come and tell a board member that you appreciate what the NRA is doing, or you want to come blast somebody for whatever the NRA is doing. I'm more than willing to put myself out there. I know that sometimes there's frustrations and other times there's elation over what we're doing. And so I have the opportunity to put myself out there. But that's about the team. So I work as part of the NRA team. The NFRA have a team, and the CPAC, the ACU Foundation, I'm a board member. So I'm not, when I say that we host CPAC, I don't host CPAC. I participated in some of the planning, been on stage, but there's an entire organization at ACU that actually puts that on. So as individuals, all of us get to participate in this, and then you too, David, or anybody else, as you learn the group, as you learn the movement, you have to earn and take as much and accept as much leadership and responsibility as you can. I mean, I believe that's important. And my role is to be prepared for anything we need to do in the movement. And it may or may not ever come, but my mission, just as it was when I was an Army officer, is to be prepared.
War is an acronym. We are ready.
We are ready.
So as far as hours a day, I'm guessing full-time, pretty much you wake up, you're thinking about this, you prepare for work all day, and then you go to sleep thinking about it.
Yeah, in my case, because I can, I get to be fully involved in this, what I do, the political world. Now, here's an interesting thing, just about, I'll say it's me, but it's almost all the directors. There's so much going on right now. We spend so much time doing this, and I do working politically. I don't get a lot of time to actually shoot. And that's one thing of what I do. I'd love to be able to have more time to just go shoot. So as an example, when I'm at the range, you'll see it. It's posted on my Facebook, on Instagram, because it's a big deal for me to get some time to actually just go out there and pull the trigger. So the days are so full. There's so much to do that I don't get enough time to do that. But pretty much I do spend full time. Now, I'll say that with a caveat is I still sprinkle in there. In the past, I was a pretty big time runner. I was a scuba diver. Well, when I was running, I eventually transitioned off the track into marathoning. I was a scuba diver. I love to ski. So I can't say that I do this 24/7, but pretty much all my working hours is done this and more.
Well, I want to say thanks for everybody for the time you're putting into it. Couple other questions. I'm going to do them in this order, I guess. This is an interesting one from David again on the gun channel side. Do you ever get down or just think it's too hard or too much of a fight? And if so, how do you fight off that feeling?
Oh, thanks. You're going to love this. So I started my politics in Hawaii on the Republican side, so conservative, but in this case on the Republican side. So consequently, because Hawaii is an extremely blue state, consequently, I have a lot more losses chalked up than wins, but I like a good fight. And I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in our Second Amendment community and movement. And I just happen to love the people that we're involved with. So no, I don't get that way anymore. For me now, politically, it's on to the next one. Yeah, we're going to win some, we're going to lose some. You know, you have to move on to whatever the next is. And I'll tell you, that's the same thing about getting up and excited about these. We've had some tremendous successes in recent years and across the board. I mean, everything from more states with concealed carry to, as you know, 16 states now with constitutional carry is just friggin' incredible. Not just the McDonald case, the Supreme Court win, stuff like that with Heller and McDonald. So we've had some great successes, culminating with electing Trump, which for whatever anybody's going to say, it's not Hillary Clinton. So all of those go along, but I also don't get too elated about those because it's just time to move on to whatever's next. There's always more. They're always trying to take our rights. They're always trying to come up with a reason why we shouldn't be able to own whatever we own. And as I've noted this before, as an American, I ought to be able to, law-abiding American, defend myself regardless of where I am, as long as it's legal that I'm there. And that's part of our effort for national reciprocity. But the other is, that a law-abiding American citizen, I believe, I should be able to own anything I can afford as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others. I had mentioned that I am by trade an armor officer in the Army. I don't know why I can't own a tank, a fully functional tank, as long as I don't interfere with somebody else's rights, or a machine gun, or a 30-round standard capacity magazine. So there's always something they're trying to take from us, something that they don't deserve to take from us. So it never ends, and I don't allow myself, there's not room to get too far up or too far down. So you just keep moving. And then the other one, David, I'd say is, boy, I've got some great friends, but I've also got great faith. So my rock is in the Lord, and that I know I can always rely on that. But I have some tremendous friends, and when you get down and dirty into the politics of the Second Amendment movement, you learn who your friends are, because it sometimes can be an ugly business, but you know who your friends are, you know who are just casual acquaintances, and those are the people I count on. So thanks for that question.
Right on, and thanks for the answer. The motivation question is always one that we always have to deal with. Every one of us has to deal with at different times, and I think that's a great answer. Having a goal and being aware that there's not always going to be successes on your way to the goal is a great way to keep your head amongst the back and forth. And
yeah, well, I'd say in my case, I like a fight. So maybe it's for David. Maybe it's a defining what is a success. The success for me isn't necessarily the win or lose, but it's hey, let's find the next fight. That's my success. All right, done with that one. Let's successfully find the next issue. Let's regain. Hey, but once we get constitutional carry, I'm on to the next fight. Let's repeal the NFA. So there's always that next one. So maybe for me, for David, it's a little different in defining what's a success and what's not. Not necessarily a single election or campaign.
I'm going to play host here for a second. My phone battery is about to die, so I'm going to say goodbye to the Instagram side. Thanks everybody on that side for watching. We've been simulcasting on our Instagram channel. 70 people over there we're saying goodbye to. And it looks like One Anchor just posted an orange version of their California magazine path. I just saw that post up. Wow. So I'm going to jump back over, and I can move my screen a little bit, make it easier to see. And jump back over to the gun channel side. CloverTac had a great question. Do you welcome direct communication from members, and how do you handle communications you get from members?
And I appreciate that. Great. Thanks, CloverTac. I dare say, and I won't say none of the other board members, because there are a couple that are out there. I am certainly equally the most accessible of all the board members for various reasons. I enjoy being on social media. I don't like the aspect of it, but I enjoy being there to be involved and be accessible. So I do welcome that. What I found, though, as and again, I don't like to talk about myself, but as my stature increased, some of the numbers on my social media increased, I found that I had less and less time to be able to respond to people. And the nature of our communications is a little awkward. People can send an email or a comment or do a post, and responding to every one of those individually, all of a sudden, we've got 5.6 million members in the NRA. It just got to be too much. I couldn't get back to folks who were asking questions. So I would try, as an example, of putting up a Facebook post or an Instagram post that explained some of what we're doing. But unless you're following it specifically and watching, you don't see that. So you get the same question over again on multiple platforms. So it is difficult. So I guess that's a long way of saying is, yes, I happen to, and I think it's not my military, because my military background, I'm pretty much an introvert. I think it's my political background that makes me want to be accessible, to go out there. As Pete said, we see each other at all these events, and I'm not entourage. I'm just walking the halls. People can approach me anytime and talk to me, send me questions. I apologize on my part, because now as I've gained more, quote, friends, unquote, I'm afraid some folks even get pretty touchy about, well, you haven't responded to me since yesterday, kind of thing. But I very much, I'm accessible through all of the platforms, and I'll throw that out, Pete, before we close up here. I'd really encourage anybody, if they want, follow my Facebook NRA. Willis Lee NRA is really, because of where I am in the social media, that's really my main platform where all my Second Amendment information is. Instagram is more a mix of personal, political, and Second Amendment, as is my Twitter. So if they follow those, they'll get an idea of what the NRA is doing. Sometimes, and the nice thing about this stuff, sometimes I too can get a little snarky on there, which is great fun for me. I try to avoid it, but it's great fun to be able to do that. And more, we're getting a lot of the cross-section of Second Amendment people on those platforms, where everything from shooters and competitors to conservationists to hunters to activists. So yeah, I think I'm accessible, at least here's the question. I'd ask anybody, they're listening to me now, anybody who's communicated with or written to or had communications with, say, 4 other directors from the NRA in this last, I'm going to go in this last year even. So I'm hoping I'm accessible.
Very cool. Now, I'm trying to read through some of the questions here. I'm ignoring some of the questions that are specific questions about NRA stuff. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, we're planning on meeting up again after the NRA annual meetings in a few weeks to address some of the specific questions. And we'll use the comments that came in, the questions that came in here, as well as anybody that wants to email them to either one of us. And we'll chat about specific stuff then. As far as wrapping up the show, though, I appreciate you taking the time to give us some insight as to what you're doing and how you do it and why. As we wrap up, you mentioned already how to contact you as far as the NRA show. Is there anything we want to wrap up and mention about the annual meetings coming up here this weekend?
Yeah, thanks, P. I'll tell you, it's and getting used to the format here. This was different for me. I felt like sometimes I was rambling a little bit because I'm not used to having that much time. Thank you to be able to respond or answer a question. And as we get ready, if any of you, your listeners or folks that are going to be in Indianapolis in this next week, it is. I'll tell you, it is really hard to meet everybody you want to meet. And a lot of times a lot of us will be at SHOT or we'll be at Great American or something like this. And we'll go the whole week. And when we get home, we'll realize there are dozens of friends that we never crossed paths with. So if you're there, by all means, reach out, hit my Facebook page or hit my Twitter or something like that and let me know. And if we can link up, that'd be great. Meanwhile, you absolutely have to take advantage. There's so much that's happening in this next week at annual meeting. Take advantage of as much as you can. It's a great opportunity. It's a great celebration. But the other thing is, it is a great signal to all the Second Amendment haters, to all the folks that want to take our freedoms, that we're gathering 80,000 strong in the midst of everything else in our lives to celebrate and fight for our Second Amendment rights. So by all means, do that. And next shot up, we'll get deeper into what we do at Great American Outdoor, what I do at CPAC as an example, or on the political side of the house, in addition to what we do at NRA. So I appreciate it, Pete. Thanks for this opportunity to be on with you.
I appreciate your time. I've been trying to figure out how to say it, but it's ironic, I think, that the level of apathy seems to shift, like this window shifts. And as you mentioned, we've got one of the best situations we've ever had as far as the Second Amendment, with constitutional carries, with concealed carry in every single state, with the Supreme Court decisions. Nothing's perfect, but we're in a good place. But it seems like the apathy comes with us, and people are now apathetic about things that are still valid, but it's impressive how people can be dismissive of all the gains. And your insight there as to why people are getting together at the NRA show, and that, whatever your feelings about the people in the organization today, the organization itself and the national meetings and the Second Amendment gathering, like I say, 80,000 people, that's something to celebrate and to appreciate. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to meet with us. Thanks everyone who joined us live. Thanks to my Patreons through crowdfunding. If you like this, consider buying me a cup of coffee. You can do that through Patreon for the price of a cup of coffee each month. You support channels like myself and others. So I encourage you to take a look at your finances. And if you think that some of the things that are happening out there are worth a cup of coffee each month, then buy myself a cup of coffee, or buy one of the other valid Second Amendment content creators out there, Second Amendment advocates. Your time is valuable, so use the internet. We're not watching TV anymore. We're not reading newspapers. We're using an interactive medium. I want to thank Willis again for joining us. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll be back later on tonight for the Daily Gun Show, and thanks for watching.
Thank you, Pete.
Eventually, I'll hit my right button here.
Guys and gals at gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching GunWebsites.com.
There we go.